And it's a great pleasure for me to welcome Dylan Smith and Joe Ferguson and to thank them for spending their afternoon with us. We'll begin with our distinguished guests providing us with some of their insights concerning journalism now, and then we'll open the floor for questions concerning the media's role today. And afterwards, we'll have a period of socializing with munchies and drinks. Gentlemen, please.
I don't have a whole lot prepared to say. I'm really more interested in what you guys want to know. I think the one thing I do want to make sure to get out there is that the function of the media, the press, whatever you want to call us, is not entirely dependent on us. It has a hell of a lot to do with what you guys do with the information that we give you. How you share it, whether it's on Facebook or emailing it to friends or in your personal discussions, how you react to it, whether you think that just because someone writes a story that you don't like so much, maybe it doesn't support your point of view, if you think that's fake news or terrible reporting, take a step back and think about it. You know, the facts do not always support our personal political points of view. You know, we live in a complex world, and sometimes people you disagree with might do something reasonable and decent for once. Sometimes someone that you think you agree with, that you may have supported, even given money to, turns out to be a complete jackass. I mean, we're kind of seeing that in Virginia right now, right? Is that fake news, or are reporters digging into some serious issues about those men? And on a more local note, Joe's being rather lambasted today about a story he did last night. And
the day before that, the day before that.
Just as the most recent example. But
first of all, I understand it was in Sarita, not in Green Valley. I didn't mean to denigrate the fine folks of Green Valley. I grew up here for what it's worth, but certainly I've caught the ire of a few activists for even going to the Bannon event last night. So just...
How did you get in?
Unfortunately, they wanted me to be there. So I think that, you know, something we can discuss is whether or not, you know, that event last night was a fundraising activity or if it was meant for the media in general to get friendly press throughout, you know,
both.
Social media.
I'm sorry, what event did you go to?
Steve Bannon last night had an event last night to raise money for the wall that he wants to build privately on private land. Daily Star has an article about it today. I'm sure Dylan's got one either up now or he's finishing. It's up. You know,
and,
chronicling what's going on.
Thanks to Dan, I stole a lot of Dan's story and stuck it in mine. Thank you, Dan.
You want me to stand up? Okay. I'm not much to look at, but I'm happy to stand up. So if you guys didn't hear me again, I went to the event last night featuring Steve Bannon and a couple of other MAGA all-stars, as they're like to call themselves, as they try to
OGs.
privately, the OGs, of trying to raise money for the wall.
Steve Bannon, right?
So that's generally not what I think about when I hear the word OG. But anyways, so hi.
Is it true that Channel 9 televised the whole meeting?
So there was some streaming of the event last night, but this event, and again, I don't want to call it a town hall, it was an event, had media partners. And that's not Dylan and I, that is conservative, pay-for-profit, corporate media that helped put on the show entirely. So they have organized it, they streamed it live over their media channels. So
I don't think Channel 9 did anything.
So, I mean,
live.
Channel
they may
9
have
was
done a
there.
drop-in spot at 10 or something.
yeah, I mean, they probably did a 2-minute segment like they would on almost anything. Really, almost anything. But let's be nice to them for now. So,
For the moment, we'll get to that.
so you know, I think it was corporate cable media that was there that was broadcasting it. At least an hour of it went live on the internet, as far as I know.
I didn't watch.
So, but as Dylan points
Luckily
out,
enough, as an editor, I just got to send my reporter. So I consider them.
I'm a little further down on the Stars food chain at the end of the day. When they send somebody, they send me. But as Dylan was pointing out earlier in the discussion, I'm getting a lot of heat for literally walking through the door. So, and because there are people that don't want me to give Steve Bannon any platform for what he does, what he believes in. But, as Dylan was kind of alluding to a little bit earlier, part of our job is just to shine the light on those things. Journalism is, in my opinion, and I don't know if you share it or not, is often it's putting sunshine to sanitize what's out there. And I would rather be in the room than not be in the room, especially as they are taking money and making plans for our backyard.
There are plenty of things that reporters go to that we don't even report on. It doesn't rise to the level of something that we actually want to write about. But we want to make sure we're there so we know what's going on, so we can make that sort of judgment call of, yes, this is newsworthy. But first, there's the judgment call of, do you send somebody?
Right.
Do you bother to go?
No,
Is it worthwhile to go? But, they're talking about someone who was the chief counselor to the President of the United States not so long ago. The guy who was the CEO of his campaign. Whether you agree with him or completely disagree with his very existence, the fact that the guy is involving himself and trying to boost something, it's newsworthy. And we should all know about it.
And somebody from this room was there last night, I hear.
Yeah, people here who know me know I'm very progressive, and I did go because I live in the community and I was able to go here last night. And I went because I wanted to know what they had to say and what we need to know in order to counter what they're saying, if what they're saying isn't true. But one of my questions about the media, and I'm really interested in how you respond to this, when you go to something like this and you hear things that are not true, for Tancredo, is that the cop?
Tancredo.
He spoke, I thought, extraordinarily offensively about the Tohono O'odham
Yes.
folks and about 1 in 5-year-old Indian children running around high on drugs and
They all had
taking money
pickup
from the
trucks to run
cartel.
drugs, and we should just build a wall around them. That's what he said.
My curiosity is, do you feel a responsibility to talk about this and say how absurd it is? Do you ignore it? How do you think the media should deal with stuff like that?
Let me follow up with her. Let me follow up with her and what Tim Steller tweeted today about how much of a loser Bannon is. I don't know, Joe, you follow him, so you probably
I know Tim a little bit, yeah. I met
Met
him.
him?
So you probably saw all of his tweets. Bannon just struck it luckily, folks, with Trump. He was a loser with Palin, big time. He tried to push Palin in 2012. He tried to push other candidates long time ago, and Tim Steller pointed that out. So following up on Ms. Lindmeyer here,
So,
go ahead.
sure you don't want to take this one? So,
You want me to take this one on your behalf?
Well,
Because you're talking about your organization.
I'll tee it up, and then
Right.
you can go ahead and knock it out of the park for me. But
Because I can criticize you guys more than
first and
anything.
foremost, my job and Tim's job are different. So my job is absolutely to walk on the straight and narrow. My opinions just simply don't matter. The only limited way that I am allowed opinions is I am a part-time transportation columnist, so I have the luxury of saying that the roads suck. But beyond that,
It's got some keen insight.
I
published by
appreciate
the
that.
Arizona Daily
They're
Star.
gonna still suck next year, by the way. I hate to break it to you, but beyond that, my job is not to necessarily have an opinion. And if I do have an opinion, it's best that you don't know it. So I work in a very different way than my colleague Tim does. Tim is paid for his opinions, handsomely. So, I'm just saying, he's not going to miss a meal. So we appreciate the support. So, Tim and I work in that kind of partnership. And so my story today is straight. But the thing is that, I have had a lot of people in my 15 years of experience tell me hateful, ignorant, stupid things. And so the measure becomes, what's the difference between Tom Tancredo last night on a stage in a public event that's probably being streamed live on the internet and a guy in a bar? And the reality is Mr. Tancredo has served this nation honorably, and that's great and all, but he serves no power. He is not an advisor to anyone of any import. And while he is on this board trying to raise money, I'm much more concerned about if they're going to raise money and where they're going to build the wall than some of his ignorant, hateful comments that don't deserve to be repeated.
And you have a limited format in which to work. Not as limited as local TV where you get 90 seconds to tell a story, but you only have so much room to fit into the paper,
Yeah,
which is what you still have to write for, right?
And that's a choice too. I mean, we did have a lot of resources last night, but that story was done at 10 o'clock and could not be done at 10:05. So, you know, the event ended at 8-ish or so. We drove back to Tucson, you know, we had 90 minutes or so to write it. So what you got is, you know, the best we could do in that kind of limited area. If I had 2 weeks to write this, as Vice News probably is going to have, you might see something a little better, a little more polished.
Yeah, the format really dictates a lot of your editorial choices, and editorial not having an opinion, but
Sure.
in the process of writing things, what's important enough to make it, what needs to be left on the cutting room floor. If you look at the story that we posted, it is long as hell. All of those details are in there. But we're online only, and we don't have the same sort of rigid deadline of get it in by 10 or it's not even going to make it into the newspaper.
Right.
And we can write as long as we want to, as long as it's interesting, and well, hopefully it's interesting still. I don't know about this one, it's pretty long. I'll blame Dan for the boring stuff. But you know, we have a little section in there about Tancredo's comments about that. I thought it was, you know, still there were plenty of things that were said that didn't make it into our story. It's not a recounting of every last moment of that, you know, pushing 2 hours basically.
I agree.
But we wanted to convey some of the tenor of what those folks on stage were saying so that you can put that into the context of what they say they're planning to do. And, you know, we noted, as Joe did, that the details of those plans seem to be very much lacking, and Dan did in his story as well. Is like basically their plan is they want to take some private money and build a wall somewhere, maybe on the border or something. It's not very well thought out at this point, and I don't think, you know, we're not making a you know, that's not a judgment, you know, a political opinion and saying there are no details there.
No, and they also said that those plans are going to be secret, so
They're secret plans so that no
spend
one
your money.
protests.
Well, not your money necessarily, but somebody's money. So unless the lawyers get involved, so I mean it's a bit complicated. So I'll get to you, I promise. You had your hand up for just a minute.
Yeah. So did you learn anything that you didn't know after you walked away last night?
So, I mean, we did a lot of work ahead of time. So one of the things that my colleague Kurt kind of dug up for us is a little bit about, you know, some of the laws on the book. So you can't build on the borderlands. The borderlands between California and New Mexico are under a treaty. And that treaty says that the 60 feet between Mexico and Arizona is all federal land, and you can't build on it.
The Roosevelt Reservation.
Correct. And so, you know, that says that now it's 60 feet from the border. And maybe that's not a big deal to anybody who's funding this wall or supporting this, but it's a good detail. And then we started looking at, you know, the miles of road where it's tribal land, or it is federal land, it is parks land, it is places where that the feds would either put the land on and would not be open to this group. And so for them saying, hey, we've talked to a dozen ranchers, sounds very promising, but it is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the amount of land that's in Arizona.
Wow.
And most of those ranchers are going to be in places where the border's pretty well patrolled already. They're, you know, closer to town, basically.
And so, you know, maybe this is a nuance that's overlooked, but it's their land as far as they say when they get up in front of reporters, they talk to reporters, but the detail is that most of them are on federal leases. They're leasing the land. They're there for decades, and they have long-standing leases.
Family connections to it, even generationally.
Sure, but it's not their land. It is a lease, which means try to put a wall on it. See what happens.
Before we take another question, I want to again touch on the idea that, you know, when you guys read the news, view the news, however you take it in, be aware of the differences between the different things that you're getting. Joe's a reporter, straight up. His job is just to bring you the facts as he sees them. In his judgment, here are the things that are important that you should know about this. Somebody like Stellar, he's a columnist. It's his job to go take Joe's facts, dig up some more facts, and put those together and give you some context and his take on it. Like our columnist Blake Morlock, who writes the What the Devil Won't Tell You column. That's what he does all day, is dig into things and try and piece them together to give people some context about what's going on. I kind of straddle that fence. I'm never shy about sharing my opinions about things, but I see my job as mostly being a reporter and trying to track down the truth about what's going on. I don't write editorials for TucsonSentinel.com. We're a nonprofit, so we don't really have an editorial point of view. Every once in a while, I'll write an opinion piece about what I think, especially about government transparency and stuff like that. Dan, he gets to write editorials about things and weigh in with the supreme power of the Green Valley News on whatever topic. And just remember the context in which the news and information that you're getting is being framed in, so that you don't take something that is published by your favorite opinion columnist in the Post or something as a news story, as tried and true fact. It's not. That's somebody's take and the facts that they choose to give you to try and support it. Whereas when you write a news story, you might have a personal opinion about something, but if the facts are trending not in your direction on that, those facts go in, right?
Yeah, you'd be surprised though. I take a bit of a dark view. I'm a bit of a curmudgeon, so I think they're all assholes, and so I have to write about them whether they get elected or not. So that's the way I try to look at it. So I don't own ranches or large tracts of land anywhere, so their decisions are going to impact me kind of minimally. So I just try to get you guys the information.
There are so many hyper partisan news outlets these days that people think that we are all like that, and most real journalists, well, all we really want to do is call bullshit on things and point out hypocrisy and incompetence and how maybe we could figure out how to do some things better. That's what we want to do. It's not about pushing party at all.
Ladies, I promised to get to you, but I promised her that I'd answer her question first. So do you still have a question?
Sort of. I mean, so you're just saying, so if you report someone and repeat the lies that are telling, that this is factual?
No, but I mean, I think that if I go into a room and I decide what's true and false, I'm just as big of a problem as the person that's lying to the entire group. I'm not a truth-telling machine, and I would hate for you guys to have my worldview for a lot of different reasons. So I'm giving you the information. I'm saying this is what it is. I can try to give you context into it.
When things are bald-faced, direct lies,
Sure.
you point them out. When
Sure,
something is not true at all.
I mean, when Tom Tancredo says that, I forgot I thought it was a 5-year-old girl, maybe it was 7-year-old. 5, there could have been a 5-year-old on the tribe running around and doing drugs. I have no way of knowing that. It doesn't sound very plausible, and so I do my best not to throw stuff in there that just doesn't feel right or doesn't have a community conversation. But when Steve Bannon gets up and says, we need to build this wall to save America, it's not for me to say whether or not he's a liar or not, or a racist, or whatever else people say about him. It's not my job. It feels like a cop-out, and maybe you agree with me on that one, Dan, but it's not for me to say. It's for other people to talk about.
Well, when they say things like immigrants are responsible for all this crime, you could say statistically that's not true.
But we have to cover what's there, and we have to tell people what's going on there. If I get into a lecture about immigration policy and the details of the number, which I'm equipped to do, it changes it. Again, it's not about me. It's never going to be about me. It's about what these people are saying in the room and me trying to express that in the most clear and concise way possible. And I do it every single day with the hopes that when I keep doing it, you have enough information to make your own decisions.
You're never going to find the perfect news story that has all of the details and all of the context and all of the analysis. It's just
You will,
You
3
could-
weeks from now.
but even then, how much will be left out of there?
I don't know. I mean, Vice is doing a thing on what happened last night. I'm super interested to know how their thing's going to be. But it's going to be 30 minutes on HBO, built by a team of 5 people. I think it's going to be good.
But it's also going to be parachute journalism from people who aren't from here, who doesn't really matter to them what happens to this community. They might do a nice package story, but they're not going to be here in 6 months, in a year,
Yeah, and
in
if the
5
wall's
years.
if the wall's built tomorrow by these people, they're not going to be here to talk about it, to explain it, or give any context to it. They're likely going to be gone. So I did see some more hands up, and I'm not trying to forget you, but this young lady back here has been waiting patiently.
Yes. So I think I'm kind of on the same topic, which I feel like there's more and more news from newspapers, mainstream news, where they print maybe what the president, has said, or whatever, wherever they get their information from, press releases, and they print it like news, even though it's patently false. And I feel like that's doing a disservice to the readers to not have a footnote about, this is what the situation is.
I mean, especially with our current president, I think the practice of very quickly and prominently saying, the president said X, and that is not borne out by the facts, it has become more and more common. I mean, you see that in every story about it, and that's why the folks who are going to be in the other party meeting, not yours, are saying that we're fake news, and the Post is fake news, and the Times is fake news, and it's all just fake and made up, and that Trump is the great truth teller, and we're liars for calling him liars.
I mean, and I think that we live in a golden age of journalists. It doesn't always feel like that, but the amount of access you have to information has never been better. And so there are a lot of news stories, and when he speaks or tweets, for God's sakes, it's unfortunately has the auspices of news. There's something going on in there. And I think that, we're at a point now where there's so many people that can respond to that kind of stuff. Not in the talking heads kind of way, but to say, North Korea, we have some concerns about X, Y, and Z. And so that's what we see from Democrats, from members of Congress, from, advisors that used to be in the administration, things of that nature. So I promise to get to you. I absolutely do, but
Somebody over here had
yeah,
their
this
hand raised.
gentleman had a question. Or not? Miss?
Do you think that the coverage of the 2016 election was good enough? Because it seems like Trump wasn't taken seriously by the media, and look what happened.
Well, I mean, I'll say this. I don't know if I've said this publicly before. I was surprised on election night. I was surprised on election night. I was standing. I was at the Republican convention where they were getting ready. I was going to talk to some local people who were going to win some races. But I was there when, a cable channel announced that Donald Trump had won. It was surprising. That's not what I was expecting. And I think that I fall into a number of journalists who are, in my case, amateur political scientists who read the tea leaves in a different way. And, I rely on polls. I understand polls. I do it at the Daily Star in a small capacity. So, I was caught off guard. I don't know if we didn't take him seriously. I know there were microphones and cameras pointed in his face on a daily basis. I think that, we are learning slowly that the social media that I thought was going to usher in a brand new age of information can be easily and quickly manipulated by driven people, and that it has changed how I do my job and how I look at social media. But I don't think we ever didn't take them seriously. I just think that the rise of...
Early on.
Well,
I mean, even the Republican Party itself did not take Donald Trump
Yeah.
seriously for most of the first year of that campaign.
Yeah,
It wasn't
but
until he actually started winning some primaries that they were like, well,
right, and
What's going on
when he
there?
became the nominee, we absolutely took him seriously. We didn't, we went to his events. There were people that followed him around, for God's sake. So I don't think it was that we didn't take him seriously, but I do think a lot of people were caught off surprised.
I think on the flip side of that, there was a little bit too much attention paid to butter emails as a serious scandal rather than a minor league fuck up, which is really what it was. I mean, it was not the end of the world. She did something stupid and then, was not very forthright about it, and that, did not serve her well, not being open and honest about how she'd screwed up. That just kept things going and going.
So I think I could actually say that I did not write the words Hillary's emails in 2016. So I think, I'm not saying that I chose that, but I checked, and that wasn't something I was paying attention to.
So about a year ago, we, here, in a meeting, we had, one of your colleagues, Sarah, from the opinion page.
Great woman.
Was here.
And a resident.
And another gal, I can't remember her name, but it was right after the election and when Trump was attacking the media, and we had a discussion about how they felt about how the media was being attacked, so on and so forth, and their constitutional right of being able to write, type, if you will. They felt, they felt pressured they were getting pressured. How do you guys feel about that now that it's been 2 years?
I get pressure every day. Certainly. Write this, don't write
But
that.
is that new?
No, I don't really think it is. I mean, I have the luxury.
Is the pressure different though? Because of
There's
Trump?
more gibberish on Facebook, but that's easily skimmable. That's not something to take too seriously.
I am far more concerned about making a mistake than I am hurting somebody's feelings. I didn't get in this to be rich. I didn't get in this to make friends. I don't expect to retire in a grand villa somewhere. My goal is very different. I think journalism is absolutely at the foundation of the democracy of this country, and it serves the people first. So, if my birthday party is really small and cozy, I'll live with that.
On the campaign trail, pretty early on, it may have even, I can't remember if the primaries had even started yet when Trump first came out with that enemy of the people line. It was, since the first time he uttered that, my little profile on Facebook has said enemy of the people. If people want to jump up and down and point fingers and call us fake news, that is their loss. They're missing out on facts that take really hard work to come up with sometimes. Real reporters sit through boring meetings that go on for hours and hours and hours. We read thousands of pages of documents, combing through them, trying to figure out what's actually new and worthwhile to tell people about. There are, folks, especially on cable TV, on every single channel, whose job it is, and they get paid handsomely, and will retire to a very nice villa, to blather on endlessly with whatever their daily partisan talking points are. That's an entirely different thing than what real reporters do. And real reporters were quite happily run down those cable TV talking heads, almost as much as the people who are jumping up and down fake news do. Get a couple beers in us, and there won't be a whole lot of respect for the denizens of Fox News and MSNBC.
Can't think that intense. Just before I ask you, is there somebody else that had a question? I want to make sure we go around the room. Okay.
I feel like the press bears responsibility for how this the last election turned out, because they gave an inordinate amount of time to, whether they were taking him seriously or not, to Trump. And like Bernie Sanders got like 3% of the time that Trump got. And it wasn't fair to the American people that they didn't get to hear Bernie's message, and all they heard was Trump.
So-
He probably got twice the time.
So I'm gonna jump in on this one unless,
The president of CBS said, he may not be good for the country, but he's good for our lives.
where's your 3% from?
I can't remember, I heard it somewhere.
Yeah, that's
But it
not
was-
gonna help me any.
10%, but it's-
I
Yeah,
don't know that
I don't think
figure.
it's 3%, I don't think it's 10%, and I would like to remind everybody who loves Bernie, nice guy, love him, never was the nominee for the Democratic Party. Of course, we're gonna point cameras at Donald Trump. Of course, we're gonna point cameras at Hillary Clinton. Those were the nominees, those were the two choices you had on the ballot. And so, I didn't fail the American public in my coverage in 2016. I'm just gonna go out and say that. 1 in 4 Americans voted at the polls. That's not my fault. I can write what I can write, I can tell you what I know, and I can get up every morning and work. I worked 50 weeks in 2016. I took 2 weeks of vacation. I worked my ass off in 2016. If we want to blame somebody, I think we have to say that 40% of Americans vote in these elections. That's a tragedy. I gave you the information as best as I possibly could, and I think that thousands of reporters did the exact same thing.
Just speaking for what we did, we staffed equally every time a candidate or a top-level surrogate came to town.
Yeah, I went to Donald Trump as much as I went to Bernie Sanders.
I skipped all of them. I didn't go to a single damn one of those things, but we had our reporters there when Bernie came, when Grijalva was angling to be Bernie's VP.
Yeah.
All of that.
I was at Reed Park.
When Trump came, if somebody came to town as a representative of one of those campaigns, we had somebody there and gave them all equal sort of play in how much we wrote about them and how prominent we made it, because they were all important people. Just because you loathe someone's stance doesn't mean they're not important and we shouldn't be writing about them. I'll be pretty honest. I'm very honest on Facebook about how I feel about Donald Trump. He is a complete and utter garbage fire. And but still, the things that he says are important and deserve to be reported and then analyzed.
Dan has a question. I'm waiting for this.
Actually, I was on the radio on Inauguration Day on the Buckmaster Show with Dan. Remember that? And we were talking about the inauguration speech, and I used said, well, some people might have thought it was impressive, others thought it was a garbage fire.
I should point out too, though, that these candidates try to play us too. Kristen Sinema was awful.
Oh, yeah.
She called up and we tried to arrange an interview with her, and she said her people, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes. Well, if you've ever seen her talk, you're not even going to get one question in. And I said, no, we need at least a half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. No, you get 15 minutes. And that's enough for her to get her talking points out, say what she wants to say, and not have to be asked any questions. She's not the only one, but I want to point out that they and their 20-year-old interns are attempt to control what you hear all the time by these means. She also is the one who threw a reporter out in Sierra Vista out of an event at a library. Now, I'm not saying the other side is any better, but I'm saying that the point is that they are trying to manipulate us also by shaping their message.
It's very much in their
We
interest.
told her to go jump in a lake, by the way, and I probably used stronger words than that.
did.
Because I'm not going to do that to my readers.
Yep.
They can go to her website and hear what she would be telling me in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very careful. We have to guard the readers and to be honest, but you got to give us the time to do it. I have turned out many interviews because people will only give you, I only have 15 minutes.
And
That's become more and more common that politicians of all stripes don't want to sit down for any lengthy period of engagement with reporters, real reporters who might challenge them,
And
because they're just scared to death.
And for equal time, I think Martha McSally was just as bad when she was serving in Congress in terms of giving press, like Dan, a chance to talk to her. So, I mean, kudos to you for that town hall, because you got something I couldn't even dream of getting with her, but
And kept pushing her to actually answer the questions as well.
yeah. So,
talk about 1 in 4 people voted. I think we need to look at that a little bit deeper. It's on Tuesday in November.
Yeah.
Half the country is cold, or it's ice rain, or the weather's crappy. It's on a Tuesday. People that have two or three jobs can't get there. It's they've been cutting back on polling places. They've been cutting back on registration. I come from Wisconsin. They messed that up really bad.
Where at in Wisconsin?
And way up north, way up by the lake,
Where?
the big lake.
Superior or Bayfield?
Superior, yeah.
Okay.
Ashland.
Chippewa Falls,
My family's from Bayfield. So, yeah.
home of wine and Cougars.
So I think we need,
Show of
I
hand.
would like to see more articles about changing the voting in this.
So I have an unpopular opinion about the National Election Day and
The holiday?
holiday.
Exactly, that's a good.
I don't think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good.
I have
I think
never
it's-
in my life had a job where I had holidays off. Never.
And I never will either.
In Arizona, it is a crime if your boss does not give you time off to vote.
That is correct.
Paid time off.
That is correct.
And so in other states where we're talking about a national holiday like that is going to serve bankers. It's going to serve insurance salesmen.
People will take a longer weekend.
Yeah, it's not going to turn into the waitresses, the nurses, the cops, the firefighters, and the journalists who are still going to be working on that holiday. It is a false holiday and it's a false choice. If we went to
Target isn't gonna close down.
right, and so the idea is that we want more voting, and I absolutely want that. In Arizona, which is what I can speak to because I'm a moderate expert on voting laws here in Arizona, there are a lot of choices. Now, they're trying to take them away at the legislature right now as we speak, but there are a lot of choices and a lot of abilities to do it. I still feel very strongly that if you want to vote in this state, it's pretty damn easy.
In Arizona, all you have to do is call up. They will send a ballot to your door. You get to fill it out at your kitchen table and send it back at your leisure. And you have a month leading up to Election Day in which to do that. And still, people don't bother.
I'm sorry.
That is, Joe's very correct. That is just embarrassing as hell. It is
Uh-oh.
your
They're
responsibility.
turning
I think probably everybody here is a voter. I would certainly
I
hope
hope.
so. You're bothering to show up here to be engaged. You're probably doing that sometime in that month leading up to Election Day. But think about how many of your friends and neighbors just cannot be bothered.
Yeah, what I was wondering is, do you have any idea why so many people don't vote? Is there one large category, or is there a number of categories that we could actually address to turn that around? Because what I hear when I go door knocking is that, well, I don't have time. I had one person tell me she couldn't get informed enough about it, so she only voted, for president, and because she didn't know anything about the rest of them.
Well, that's undervoting,
Which is
which is a problem, but that's not even in my calculation of the 40% or 1 in 4, depending on what kind of election we're talking about. The ballot's long, the ballot's complicated. The state's trying to make it worse where we only vote every 2 years. It's not getting better, it's getting worse, but at the same time, I teach a small classroom of journalism students who I naively sometimes believe that they're interested in politics, and half of them don't vote. And the reasons are time, and it's too complicated, and I can't do it online, and I'm again, going out on a limb here, those feel like excuses more than they feel like genuine concerns. In somewhere else, there might be issues with getting to the polls, and that's the only way you vote, and I empathize with that, and I understand that, and we need to make it better. But here, which is where I can speak to with some authority, it feels like excuses more than it feels like anything else. And I would much rather see an under ballot than a no ballot.
Well, once somebody actually develops the habit of voting, maybe they'll start filling in a few more races. If you can't even get them to do it in the first place, that's the big hurdle.
And the trick is always to tell them to start out filling it upside down.
Certainly,
If they fill out the most least interesting race because they want to vote for president, that means they fill out more of the ballot.
certainly, voter suppression as a tactic in legislation is a big problem.
Yep. Going on TV.
Gerrymandering in certain areas is a very big problem. It means your vote doesn't quite count for so much. I do hear a lot of people talking about gerrymandering in presidential and Senate races, and
That's weird.
it's
That doesn't work
just,
that
that
way.
doesn't work that way. So, people kind of use that as a catch-all phrase for things that, make it hard for people to vote. Really, one of the biggest problems, and we saw it so much in the last presidential cycle, and again, in this last one, voter suppression as a campaign tactic is also a huge problem. Candidates don't focus so much on getting you and you and you to the polls. You're gonna show up, they know that. They know who is going to show up. They focus more attention on making sure that people who might be voting for the other guy don't go to the polls. So we have all of these negative campaigns, which have gotten worse and worse, and
Be sure to show
Trying
up on
to-
Wednesday for where the polls
not
close.
even that idiotic, but just, trying to make it so that people get so disgusted with the political process,
Yeah.
with the level of rhetoric, with the level of, mudslinging and hatred. And,
Advertising.
that is, sorry to tell you guys, that is not strictly just a Republican tactic, that is across the board. That they all focus just as much attention on making sure that the other side isn't going to show up as they do on turning out their base. And people are not trying to appeal to somebody who might be wavering in the middle on the basis of the reasonableness and rationality and ability to achieve the policies that they're proposing. It's all just come down to nonsensical bullshit buzzwords.
Sir, you had a question?
Yeah, I think a deterrent to mass voting throughout the electorate is the way the system says that you can have fewer votes than your competitor, and the competitor can still win.
Right.
Trump goes in with 2.5 million fewer than his opponent, and he becomes president. And who cares about that? Nobody's done anything to try to change that.
I think that electoral reform is important. My concern is this, is that depending on what that reform looks like, we would never see another candidate step foot in Arizona ever again. They had campaigned in California, they campaigned in New York, and that's it. We would never see them again. I'm from a flyover state, Wisconsin, and it would happen there too. So while I do want to see one vote, one person, and how that works, I'm not the expert. I'm certainly not, but I think there is a real danger of reforming it in a way that's going to make it even worse.
So you're gonna say that the people that you want to vote are the one person, and the people you don't want to vote are
I just think that if we do this thing where we get rid of the electoral college entirely, millions and millions of Americans will never see a president come campaign in their state ever again, because they'll go to the coasts.
Well, why do you need a president to come into your state to campaign?
Because
You watch television,
Well, first off,
you know what your president.
how many races are there on the ballot? Sir, how many races are there on a ballot when you go to vote?
One that counts.
Well,
Really?
well, I think.
This election, one that counted.
Well, so
What
for me,
happens at the
here's
State House doesn't count?
here's the
that
thing
counts.
though, is that for me, it's that you have to say, okay, well, I know where these two candidates stand. I want them to come to Tucson. I want to know how they feel about mining at the Grand Canyon. I want to know about how we're going to fix Arizona's water problems from the most powerful person running for my vote. They're not going to talk about that in New York. They're not going to talk about that in California. Arizona, Green Valley has issues that are important to us. And if we just go to this national discussion about national issues, they're not going to get one single comment. And that's a tragedy for us.
If we had a national popular vote system where we just elected the president based on the majority rules, Arizona would be out of water within about 5 years.
California get it all.
California would get every last drop of Colorado River water, and there would be no one left living in Arizona.
And honestly, it'd be a population contest.
Congress that also gets to vote on
Well,
these things.
Apparently only one race counts, though.
No.
Okay, good. But if we're talking about that, then there are a plethora of other races on the ballot that are vitally important, and which the Electoral College plays no role at all.
No, no, when 70,000 people in 3 states make the difference over more than, or almost 3 million people, of course it matters. But Congress, representatives of Congress are also supposed to be taking our messages to Washington. And they
And hopefully they be effective.
Pardon me?
And hopefully they are effective in doing that, certainly.
And hopefully they are, yeah.
Didn't one man just shut down the federal government for how many days?
What was it, 35?
35.
I'm worried about Congress's powers some days.
Well, we certainly have.
Well, they could have prevented that. I mean, the Congress could have prevented that if they wanted to.
Neither of us are political scientists who have proposals on the table to reform the Electoral College in some way.
There is one idea.
You know, there are a bunch of ideas out there. I have yet to see one that I personally would favor because they all have pitfalls. It is a somewhat flawed system. It's, you know, based on our government being a federal system, a collection of states that have their sort of equal level of sovereignty.
And just for one last aspect, it's really hard to dismantle that system. It's purposely hard to dismantle that system.
Well, and that's really, no matter what, even if, you know, 75% of the people in this country wanted to change the system and get rid of the Electoral College, it's probably still not gonna happen because those 75% of people are not gonna live in a majority of the states. And those small states, the flyover states, are not gonna give up that sort of weight.
I'm from one of the states.
Well, it will be interesting to see as the experiment of the states that have gone away from winner take all. So that will.
Doing a proportional breakdown, you know, instead of winner take all in the Electoral College, a weighted delegation
And it'll be
would
more
change things a little bit.
reflection.
So, I don't know where we are on time, so I think that's the only concern I have. I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy to stay as long as I can, you know, draw
We
breath.
can talk about the media until the cows come home.
Or bash on politicians.
Well,
I mean, that's even more fun.
I mean,
Beer nearby?
are you guys hungry for some wine or something? Is that?
Oh, that would be dangerous.
Yeah. Well, let's
Looks
take
like
a
we
few
got
more
some
before
more
we break up.
questions, or-
There are more and more hands going up. You, sir?
There is a case in court presently to attack the problem of all winner take all in the electoral college. There is litigation that started in California. And I'm not so sure where it is, but there is a case to attack that problem.
Well, don't look at the Supreme Court to hold,
I
change
don't
that.
know. Look at what Roberts is doing lately.
Not the current one.
Thank God.
Go ahead.
I think it's important to point out that the Electoral College has helped the Democrats in the past. It's just the way it fell. And you've got a guy making inflammatory, ridiculous statements every single day. He got so much press. And it made a difference because his kind of message goes to the most uneducated, unaware people.
So just for a moment, and again, I'm as close as we're gonna get in this room to the mainstream media. I don't feel that's me, but I wear that label sometimes. So you saw a lot of Donald Trump and his message was amplified. There were also things that Donald Trump supposedly said that were amplified on Facebook and social media. I don't know which one of those two things got people to vote. I suspect it's a smattering of both. So the question becomes is that
About the Russians.
if I sit down and I don't mention Donald Trump, that's not changing anything in my opinion. There are people that are gonna make up things that they say and they're gonna form news organizations that sound pretty good. The New York Daily News, BangerMash.org, you know, just put out this news story about Hillary that said this. So I guess the question is that yes, he was in the news a lot, and yes, he made a lot of statements, but I still kind of push back on the idea that we shouldn't have covered him. He was the Republican nominee for.
You shouldn't have covered it.
I
What
think-
I'm saying.
I think the media could
Because
have.
of the circumstances, he got a lot of press.
Yeah.
You also have to ask yourself whether Hillary did the smartest job of campaigning.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, Hillary didn't go to the places
I
that
recall
if
her
they
saying
flipped,
that she
they would have flipped the
just
election.
found a way.
I mean, Donald Trump came here. I don't know why Hillary Clinton never came to Arizona.
She did too.
What?
Tucson.
Tucson.
Oh.
We don't count Phoenix, that's that other
She sent Bernie to represent her.
And her husband. But
Yeah, Bill
was she
Gates.
too busy to come to
That was
a
bad
Democratic
idea.
place where turnout would be high?
You know, the Clinton campaign took a lot of places for granted because they were seemingly Democratic bastions, and they thought they had them in the bag.
I can
Donald
think of
Trump
3
went to
states.
my hometown, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I posted on Facebook that day, but what the F is Donald Trump doing in Eau Claire?
Yeah.
They were looking at the data a little more closely. Back to the Electoral College for just 1 second.
Oh, sure.
If those 70,000 people in Eau Claire and Grand Rapids and Pittsburgh had gone with the way the Clinton campaign expected, a lot of Democrats would be cheering the Electoral College as a bulwark of democracy that kept Donald Trump from being president.
We probably wouldn't have noticed. We're not always the smartest one in the room.
Well,
They said Bill Clinton knew 2 months before he started reading.
in the back.
Something that, some of the comments here about the electoral college, people have been dancing around, the strategy that was involved. Trump's campaign made it a point to narrow down and figure out how to get the most electoral votes.
Yeah.
And then concentrated on the message that the people in those areas
Yeah.
wanted to hear. That was strategic, that's not the fault of the electoral college.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hillary Clinton's mistake was she ignored those people.
Right.
That's strategic,
Yeah.
that's a campaign decision.
Right.
That's not the fault of the electoral
Yeah.
college. We have to stop blaming the electoral college setup
I agree.
for something that is strictly a strategic.
And those people were pretty much directly lied to. They were told their factories were coming back.
Yeah.
And, but someone bothered to even go talk to them at all, and that swayed a lot of people that they were even paid attention to.
I think that the people in here that knocked on doors will tell you that the number one assurance that somebody's gonna vote for you is meeting them,
Right.
in some way.
I am curious about, I thought it was really, there wasn't a very successful coverage of all of the Republican candidates. Trump got a lot of attention in the primary when he ran.
Yeah.
We now have a lot of Democrats who are going to be running in a primary. What is an appropriate way to cover that many people? That's gotta be a hard journalistic job.
Well, again, I think for me, I cover who comes here. I'm, a local reporter. I have no business, covering the campaign 2020 from Tucson. I cover the people that come here. We talk to them. We talk about local issues. I think that what the Green Valley Coordinating Council has a lot more role in your life than you think it does, more than Donald Trump does at the end of the day. Although his tax cuts are
We
beginning to
can
hurt.
talk about it a little bit in how we choose locally,
Yeah.
as far as, and that gets played out on the national level. I mean, what we write about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton or, Tulsi Gabbard or whatever does not resonate in DC and New York very much. But, looking back at what was that ridiculous TUSD race? 2010, when there were like 12 or 15 people
Oh, yeah,
running for
I mean-
TUSD, and that's not even a primary. That's the general. It's if you get yourself on the ballot, you're in that race, and that was
How about
nuts. But you got to look at who seems to have a platform that is thought out and reasonable and possible, who is getting volunteer support, who's raising money, who seems to be running a credible campaign versus who's hanging around for the attention.
So I'm going to change the venue from 2010 QSD to 2018 CD2. And so we had a lot of Democrats running in CD2. And I honestly think that while we didn't pay attention to Matt and Ann and a couple of others, we also looked at some of those smaller candidates. There's a guy that you would have never met, that would have never came up on your radar if we hadn't written about him. But that guy thought it was so important to get his record expunged for the accusations that he raped a girl, because it was more important to his political career than that, and trying to have that record be suppressed. So we look at those things in a lot of different ways. And yes, there's the horse race of volunteers and endorsements and money. But at the same time, we also take a good look at their backgrounds. It's something that may not make the paper all the time, but In Yaya's case, we got to it.
That was a situation indeed. And his campaign didn't last very long because there were a couple of reporters in this town who were willing to put in the work of figuring out just what the hell was going on. One other candidate, at first I thought you might be talking about Billy, the way you kind of set that one up. Here's somebody you might not have heard of, but who represented himself pretty well as a candidate. He didn't raise a whole lot of money, but he was a good speaker, and he ended up getting himself a job. Now he's working in Kirkpatrick's office, and probably someone you are going to see involved politically for some time to come. And Billy's, as I wrote about, Billy's, the skeleton in his closet was, not paying his parking tickets.
Well, no, the first skeleton in his column was to announce he was going to run as a Democrat while he was still a Republican.
Well, there was that kind of thing too.
That was a little.
It really laid
awkward.
the kind of groundwork. I immediately got a message that morning from a bunch of Democrats who know what's going on with, who is Billy Kovacs?
So
Yeah.
Can you explain why there was a difference in the reaction between the story you just talked about, where basically the reporting killed that candidate, and Trump with the Access Hollywood discussion with Billy Bush?
Yeah.
And it didn't seem like that hurt him.
this feels like.
Well, when did the Billy Bush tape come out? The weekend before the election? Very soon.
It was entirely.
That was in October, right? That was, he was already the nominee.
October surprise.
People had already, some people had already voted for him, I think. Ballots had already been cast. A campaign, unless maybe you shoot someone in the face in the middle of Fifth Avenue, is not going to go off the rails at that point. Here, in the case of Yahya Yutsel, there was somebody that no one had ever heard of before who got into the campaign late, barely got himself on the ballot, he was so late, and didn't have a lot of oomph behind him. It wasn't our job to try and derail him, but the fact that we went and reported on his past activities and the absurd way he was running his campaign with just filing made-up receipts with the FEC, that just took the rug right out from underneath him. If he had been the front runner and that was the last week of a campaign, that'd be something that a whole lot more people would ignore.
And I do think that there are a lot of people that held their nose and voted for their party in that particular election, sir, more so than Yaya, where you had a lot of choices.
Well, that was a primary. And if you're looking for someone in a primary to represent your point of view and you have 7 or 8 people running, you have, probably everybody in this room, when you were thinking about who to vote for, you had to sit down and choose between at least a couple of them in that race, right? You had to put some thought into it. Whereas when it came time for the general election, did you put a lot of thought into your choice there, or did you just run with the one that you knew you were going to vote for months and months and months?
For the judges, you can do that here in Arizona. But for the judges, you can do that. You can, I don't know if you folks know that, for the judges, you can see who appointed, the judges that back up for re-election, you can go back and look at who appointed these judges in the first place. And so if you're a Democrat, you look for Janet Ann, who is our governor, or you look at Ducey, and you can make your decision that way.
But I think going back to CD2, I get the sense of the room that some of y'all voted for Billy, but in November, all of you voted for Ann. And I think that's the difference when we're talking about why people still voted for Trump even after really painful news for some people in this room came out. Party over person.
Yeah, Joe, you said something earlier about if somebody shows up, then, that's somebody that's gonna get voted for. I look at it, there's what people say, which I really don't listen to. There is their past action, which I investigate, but I have to dig for it. It's not like usually spelled out well in the paper. And then there's what you brought up, that if they show up, then you can kind of get you can get a feeling for them when you're in the room that you can't get on television. So do you think that them showing up is the most important thing?
I don't think it's the most important thing. I show up to a lot of things. I'm still not important. But generally speaking, you know, I think the retail politics is very important. Now, I'm talking to a room full of people who are very active, very knowledgeable, all very good looking, and I want to say that you guys know your stuff. But for somebody who is staying at home as a mom and maybe reads my paper, maybe doesn't, and somebody comes to the door and they say, I want you to vote for me, or I want you to vote for my candidate, that's huge in terms of general populist voting.
And
And
especially
I don't think
for more
it's,
local stuff.
and I don't
Even
think it's
in Congress.
important as much as it's important to that person
Yeah.
and their choice. You know, Steve Farley right now is running for mayor up in Tucson. He is riding buses talking to people. I don't want to talk to people when I'm riding the bus. And so, you know, generally speaking, you know, Steve Farley is really going out of his way to try to talk to people, not groups, not donors, but he's really trying to talk to people, and people reward that kind of behavior.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
On the topic of showing up, I think it's an important part of the process that has fallen a little bit by the wayside to have candidates for office and people, once they're in, show up in public and answer some damn questions for
Please.
once.
Please, I mean, I get paid for it, but still, please show up.
Or show up and just talk to us one-on-one, and it's incumbent on you guys, back to my point of you play a role in all of this, to push the people that you support to show up and explain themselves. Don't just, you know, say that, you know, well, Donald Trump needs to do more interviews and, you know, Martha McSally should have done more town halls. The people that you vote for, where you actually have a little bit of leverage, encourage them to play a more engaged role in this, where they are not directly in control of the message that's getting out there, where they can be held accountable.
And again, to your point, you know, we really have Kirsten Sinema. I've asked her twice now that she has a 6-year term in the Senate. No one's voting for her for 5 good years. She hasn't talked to us.
Yeah.
I asked about how everybody is
She
going
doesn't have to right now, right? She's
Well, but I mean, like, we reached out to the Southern Arizona delegation over last weekend. We said, what's important to you before the February 15th deadline? 4 out of the 5 people I asked answered the question.
Tom got back to you,
Tom got back to me. He always does.
but he's barely in southern Arizona.
Right, but he's just happy somebody called. But Martha got back to me. Kirsten did not. And that's the second time she's done that. That'll be in tomorrow's paper, but again, that's something on the party pushing back on, that we need to hear from these people. Whether they're talking to you or talking to me, it's the same thing.
Okay, if there are,
There
There
are
are
a bunch
always-
more. Go
okay.
ahead. I can stick around for a
So
while.
do you guys want a break in 10 minutes, or do you want to have 3 questions and then break? Okay, 3 questions, and then you can talk to them one-on-one and drink some wine and whatever.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to know something about your craft. On TV, we're always hearing about, well, my sources say, yada, yada, yada. How do you get sources, and how is it that you trust them, and how much do you use them? I know you do a lot of research to find out facts about what happened in the people's past, but that's not always that easy, or maybe you need somebody to point you in a direction. How does that happen for you?
That's a great question. Thank you. We can stop talking about Trump for a second.
Yeah, so look, before we start, well, we should probably just do a baseline. The Daily Star rarely uses unnamed sources in our publication. It is an incredibly high bar. If I quote somebody, I use their name.
That doesn't mean you're not getting a tip to go,
Sure.
dude, check this out.
Sure, but before we get to that, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. We don't see a lot of that in mine, and I don't see that in your publication either.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, it really depends. It has to be somebody, and this is something that, you know, would be the bar for most legitimate news organizations. Somebody where there's only that way to get the information. You know, somebody whose job is at risk if they tell you something. Somebody who's, you know, livelihood, whose public reputation would be ruined if they told you something. Not so much about them. You have to look at what is their self-interest. What are they getting out of this?
Right.
Exactly, and there's a lot of that. I do sometimes, especially in some opinion pieces, where we kind of quote the general tenor of things. 5 people down at City Hall tell us something. We're not going to make sure that 5 people get fired. We're going to say, well, this is what's going on in City Hall.
So for me, I don't spend a lot of time at my desk. I'm at meetings. I'm at more meetings. I'm at lunches. I'm in more lunches. I promise you. And some of you might know that I use a social media platform called Twitter, where I say things online. I talk to people in that way. But a lot of the time when I go to these meetings, I'm not sleeping somewhere else and new and exciting. I'm talking to people. I'm calling people on my phone. I really am very busy in just talking to people and listening. No, that Allie Miller lied about that. Anyways,
just that though.
I've been staying awake for a while now. Anyways, so I talk to a lot of people, and some of that develops into a relationship where they call you, or sometimes they look at the reporting you've done on one story and they say, here's the next thing you should look at. And so that's the kind of building of reputation that we do, where we say to people, we're here, we're listening. And so, as weird as it might sound, for people who are not in this club, me going to see Steve Bannon last night demonstrated I'm listening, and that I care about what their political beliefs are.
And the other local people here saw that you were there, and maybe you're going to get a tip in 3 months because you shook their hand.
Right, and so that kind of stuff. And again, I understand there's a difference of agreement on Steve Bannon, but the idea that I'm willing to show up, I'm willing to listen, even if it's not necessarily my cup of tea, is huge for developing those sources in the first place. And then what I do with the information. Sometimes leaving a voicemail on a reporter's phone is not necessarily going to turn into a story. But if I call you back, at least I called. Yeah, I listened.
We should say that it would be a pretty rare instance for a news story to develop out of one anonymous source, and there's not a whole lot more to back that up. We might credit something to one source, but there's going to be a document. There will be some emails they sent us. There will be other people who are telling us stuff on deep background that, that thing is what's going on. Running with, somebody who has an axe to grind telling you something outlandish is not going to turn into a story unless it's to point out that somebody's trying to sell you something.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Young lady?
I just wanted to point out that I don't think you ought to feel bad about them not talking to you. They don't talk to us either.
And I think,
They don't have emails sometimes. They don't have local offices and cinemas. She didn't even have an email that you can email to sources.
No, and then,
Patrick, it was a secret where her office is gonna be. Nobody answers the phone anyway, and their voicemails are always full. If you needed something as a constituent, you wouldn't be able to find it. Those Democrats who sent me all those dead trees have not deigned to tell me how to reach them if I, as a constituent, need them.
and I look.
So don't feel bad that you don't, let alone, we don't get public meetings.
Well, they run when they see us coming, but.
Well, no, but and for what it's worth, I think it's as equally important that I don't get a phone call as you not getting a phone call. I don't think there's one that's better than the other. I think it's terrible that they're that way, and I appreciate it when reporters and editors like Dan say that they're only going to give us 5 minutes to talk. It really opens up an idea that, this is how we're getting treated. It's not poor us, it's why do they think that they are so important that they can meet with donors for hours and us for 2 minutes?
Joe, let me ask this club a question. What if she were to come here and speak to you and said, but I don't want any reporters in the room, would you still allow her to come?
I got one yes, and
No, I'm responding, I'm not saying yes or no.
I'm raising my hand, I want to respond to that.
Yeah.
My response to that, Dan, would be, oh, okay, I got it, but you will be videotaped. From the beginning, from the time you walk into the door till the time you walk down the hall.
But I can't ask a videotape questions. And so,
Yeah,
and
but
then-
we can ask questions
Right.
that are on the
But
videotape.
these are like people also who like to do interviews by email because they don't want the follow-up questions, and then they ignore the questions that you ask. So it's best face-to-face, but, and I'm not saying she's avoiding us for any reason other than she's probably very busy, and I know they all are right now, and it's not anything I take personally at this point. But
I will.
But I wonder, would the club allow it? And if you said no, I would understand that, by the way. I wouldn't like it, but I would understand it.
Well, I personally think it sort of depends if you're having a sort of democratic strategy session
Sure.
versus a public where she's expressing positions. I will say, we made a real effort to get Kirsten Sinema down here and we got nowhere. We could not get her at all. And I take very seriously putting on our backs, dealing with our party, and seeing that the people in our party are responsive. That's an obligation we have to get to, in my opinion, our chairman of the Arizona Democratic Party, to see that Kirsten Sinema starts being responsive, not only to the press, but to the people sitting in this room.
So I'll be honest with you. I called the Arizona Democratic Party chair, talked to her, I had her phone number. I still couldn't get her to convince Sinema to call me back on an important story.
Yes, Cinema was saying, oh, I swept through southern Arizona and I visited Green Valley, so I grilled them. Where were you in Green Valley?
Yeah.
You were at someone's home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Once.
A high dollar donor
Private
probably.
party.
Yeah.
Right.
And I actually know where she is,
Yeah.
the person called me afterward. And so, but she could say, oh, I went to Green Valley.
Yeah.
She didn't.
Right.
No, she didn't.
Right. We gave her the opportunity to come here and she chose the private party because she wanted to invite who came. And we said, no. If you're coming, we can all come and hear you. You don't get to determine who comes to hear you.
But the Democrats have that reputation. You could see it in the CD2 race where you had all of those candidates out there, forum after forum after forum. That was very impressive, and it was so hard to get the others under the same roof. In fact, we didn't because of Leah Marquez Peterson. Just, you know, we see what happened to her.
Well, they were under one roof once and they kicked me out.
Yes,
They would not let me go to that debate.
You should tell them what you tried to do what you did do to get to the debate, though.
Well,
I think this is important. This shows the level of dedication Dylan did to try to get into that
the
event.
debate was advertised as being open to any Pima County Republican.
Sorry.
And you had to pay your, $750.
Yeah.
So, changed my party registration. Open to any Pima County Republican, I'm a Republican. But I showed up and they had in an envelope in cash my $7.50 waiting for me with my name on it. Still haven't opened that. That's sitting on my desk. That's my
Trophy.
That's my reserve fund. That's what that is. So yeah, all through the primaries when I was moderating all of those Democratic candidate forums, debates, whatever you want to call them, yeah, it was a Republican determining which questions would be asked. So I'm not personally all that big on the team game of politics. You know, and it was unusual being able to vote in that other primary this time around. And well, maybe I'll stick with that. Maybe I won't. We'll see how that happens. Mainly, I kind
You
of
should keep doing it. If there's Democrats do it, you should be a Democrat again. You should just keep
yeah,
changing your party.
whoever's going to kick me out is pretty much what I'm going to do.
Fans do that all the time. Fans do that all the time. They just like to pay, to declare a party.
For what it's worth, since he gave up his party registration, I'm also not a Democrat. I'm an independent, and I will stay that way
No such
for
thing as an
long
independent.
as I cover politics.
You're
Sorry,
a
guys.
non-party voter,
No, but I do vote. So there's
so-called independent.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Is that
I think
it?
that was three.
That's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.